Good evening all, and welcome. Being followed is an incredibly uncomfortable experience, as sadly some of you may know all too well. So tonight, it's time to get uncomfortable and let the darkness take control. About 2 years ago, I moved from my college town in Arizona to Woodland Hills, California for my new job. I was 21 and living alone in a studio within 2 blocks of an outdoor mall and gym. The apartments were older, built in the mid-70s, but were well maintained with a fencing cameras around the entire complex and gated entrances. It was a fairly nice area, mostly young professionals and families, and it felt pretty safe. After this incident, I didn't leave my apartment complex alone after dark. One night I decided to take a walk after my workout. It was barely nightfall, and still fairly warm. I grabbed my water bottle and started walking past the gym in the opposite direction of my apartment. I walked for a little while, turned around and started walking home. That's when I noticed a white Escalade with completely blacked out windows that had passed me previously, passed me again. They drove down to the light and made the turn, so I thought nothing of it. Only when I saw the car for the 3rd time did I start to panic. By this point it was well past dark, and most people were heading home from the gym and the outdoor mall. I was still a few blocks from the gym and the car kept driving past, slowing down and speeding back up if they saw anyone around. I cut through a parking lot to try to get to the closest store open, a McDonald's. Before I knew it, the Escalade was back, and in the parking lot, between me and the McDonald's, the car started slowly circling the parking lot, and the windows rolled down part way to reveal 3 men in their 30s to 40s just staring at me. At that point I was frozen, and decided to stand under a light by a closed store while frantically trying to call my friends from the apartment complex to come get me. My mum, friends from other states, anyone so that I wasn't alone. The Escalade kept circling, slowing down to barely an idle every time they'd pass me. I saw the door of McDonald's open, and a younger guy came out, clearly done with his shift, and headed to his car. I started yelling for him to wait and that I needed his help, and took off running towards him. The Escalade sped out the parking lot back to the nearest light and turned again. I apologized to the younger guy for scaring him, and asked if he could please walk me to the gym, thinking the men were probably gone and I could wait a few minutes there before walking back to my apartment. We made it to the gym, and he made sure I felt safe there before going back to his car. I waited for 10 minutes, still trying to reach my friend who lived in the complex, so he could come get me. I wasn't able to get a reply, so I called one of my girlfriends from back home and spoke to her as I did the walk the rest of the way home. I got past the main intersection before the car turned down my road and started following me again. My heart sank, and I had a horrible feeling that if I didn't get inside the gate before they got to me, I'd never be seen again. I broke into a sprint and screamed into my phone that I'm being followed and for my friend to not hang up. The gate had just started to close behind another resident's car and I barreled through it, sprinting the way back to my apartment and locking the door. After about 3 hours, I went to take my dog to go potty before bed, and out of curiosity or sheer stupidity, I walked back towards the gates I came through, still safe within the fence, and I saw the Escalade parked on the other side of the road, waiting just outside the camera's field of view. I calmly turned and walked my dog onto the interior apartment complex out of their sight. They came back to the same spot every night for several days, and after that, I never saw them again. This happened back in the 90s, when I was still in primary school, so I really had no clue how much danger I was in. I would have been around 11, living in a regional city of Australia. For the last year I had been having a lot of trouble at school, getting bullied a bit by classmates and felt really singled out by my teacher. My mom worked around the corner from my school, So when everything would get too much at school, I would literally just walk out of class, down the road and onto her work site. It would take me about half an hour to walk there along a main road. A few times I noticed a small white car drive past me slowly, but I only noticed this because I would see the same car go up and down the street as I was walking and while I was sitting outside of my mum's work site. After a while, I started seeing the same car driving up my street at home and parked along the streets that my brother and I would ride our bikes around in. I didn't usually see the same cars and people. It was just like, oh, there goes that car again. My family followed a serious routine. Mondays, swimming and tutoring. Tuesdays, netball training. Wednesday, netball game. Thursday, basketball training. Fridays, we would go and see professional basketball or football, depending on the season. Saturday was my brother's basketball games, and Sunday were our days to go to the rivers with friends or swims or barbecue lunch. It never changed unless someone was sick. So one Friday night I'm dressed and ready to go watch the basketball game, but I can't find my shoes. I'm pretty sure that they're in the car, which is in a garage under our 2-story house. To get it, I have to walk down the outside steps at the front of our house, which has a full view of the road. I walk out the front door. At the end of our driveway, I notice a small white car. Now, I've never taken that much notice of the white cars up until this point. And it wasn't uncommon for cars to park in this exact spot for our neighbor. But I just got a sinking feeling in my stomach when I looked at it. I kept walking down the stairs, and as I got close to the bottom, the driver's side door opens, and a man gets out quickly. I keep walking towards the garage, and he starts moving towards our driveway. That was the point when something inside me told me to scream for my parents and run and lock myself in the car. I did exactly that, and this guy who was halfway up my driveway at this point turned around and ran back to his car and drove off. By the time my parents came out, there was no evidence that this had happened, and they didn't believe me. A week later, there was a notice in our school newsletter about a man in a white car attempting to take another child from my school at the same night. My parents were very shaken and took me seriously after reading that. I don't believe he was ever caught, but it definitely taught me to listen to my intuition and take notice of my surroundings. As a kid growing up, I lived in a pretty secluded neighborhood where my bus would drop me off from school. I had to walk through a small wooded area and a good distance down the road to get home. The houses were not close together, and nobody was ever outside or anything. That led to some less than pleasant encounters with strange drivers. I remember a black car with tinted windows would occasionally visit while I was outside. They would speed at me and seemingly try to hit me, turn around, and do it again. I had to hop a neighbor's fence twice to avoid being struck, as they would even come up on the grass and skim the fence. I was too young to have any friends that drove at the time, so it wasn't one of them playing a messed up prank. I don't know why they did this, but I remember them coming down my street a few times as a kid, whenever I was in a yard and not on the street. They would just drive at cruel pace past me. Another time I was in middle school walking home. I did dress nice that day, but in my opinion, I definitely still looked like a child. A man in a faded red truck slowed and paced behind me. He rolled down his window and asked, "Hey, are you broke down anywhere? You need a ride?" I politely declined, saying I didn't drive. "Are you sure?" I don't know why, but him asking if I was sure gave me a chill. I politely reaffirmed that I was in middle school and couldn't drive, which was probably a stupid thing to say. Kids are dumb. He still slowly paced me. Though we were both silent, it was probably only about 10 seconds, but every passing moment was increasingly heavy. I was right about to bolt when he drove off to the end of the street. I ran the rest of the way home, went inside, and from my kitchen window, watched that same truck slowly drive down my street twice more. I told myself maybe he was just an awkward guy who was bad at picking up women, but why did he come down my street again twice after I got home? Why did he continue to pace me, trying to pick up a woman who clearly looked like a school kid? Maybe he was debating on taking me. Maybe he really was just a strange person, though he gave a bad vibe from the start. I was more cautious walking home after this, but I never saw that guy again, thankfully. My sister and her best friend were chased by a man in a red truck when they were in elementary school, but I don't know if it was the same guy. Living in the middle of nowhere in the south, there's a ton of trucks everywhere. It was years before my encounter and the guy didn't chase me. But who knows? All I know is that there were some crazy people to go down to our neighborhood, and I wasn't the only one who experienced them. This happened a while back. I was probably around 10 to 11, meaning my brother, Alex, was around 8 or 9. We were walking home from the bus, which takes 7 minutes to do, when I noticed something was off. I didn't see anything at first, but I just knew something was wrong. So my brother and I started walking home. As the only two who got off at our stop, him and I, this blue and silver beat-up truck drives past us, and I think nothing of it. It never slowed down or stopped, it just kept on going. Alex and I were holding hands, as my grandmother always told me to do with him, as he's my younger brother, and I don't want anything to happen to him. Nothing happens at first, but then the same truck drives around again, driving our way this time. There was a cul-de-sac at the end of our road, and it was driving slower this time as we went up the road and turned out of sight. Now Alex and I were nearing the three-way intersection that connected the cul-de-sac road to the other side road. Right up the main road, the man just drove down. I happened to look down the street and see the truck driving real slow down the street towards us again. I knew we had to run. I knew there was no other option. I knew that if we didn't, my brother and I would not be safe. I don't know how I knew, but I did. As soon as we passed a house that blocked us from view, I turned to Alex and spoke to him exactly 4 words. No questions. Just run. And we did. In our driveway, which is about 100 feet long, there's a row of bushes and pine trees that divides our home from the next door neighbor. I dragged him in there and told him to be quiet and that I would explain later. I watched as the same truck drove down around the cul-de-sac again, before coming to a stop right in front of our house. I had to hold my brother's mouth shut because he was crying, and I was scared whoever was following us would hear him and hurt us. I was more worried for his safety at this point than my own. I was in fight or flight mode. I was the big sister. I had to protect him. I looked at him and said the truck was following us, and I told him to not be scared. I said I wouldn't let anyone hurt him, and it seemed to calm him down a little bit. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the door to the truck opened and out came a man. He was tall, skinny and a mess. Short hair covered by a torn baseball cap, ripped jean shorts and a puke green tank top. He entered our yard and looked around a bit. Alex and I were still in the bushes, and I was trying to find a way to get to our house safely without getting this dude's attention. The guy left after what felt like forever and entered his car. He started to drive away slowly. I waited a few minutes to make sure he was gone before turning to my brother and saying, "We need to run. When I count to 3, we're going to run behind the house to the back door, okay?" He agreed, and we waited a few more seconds before I started counting. I still didn't have a good feeling about this, but I knew we had to move. I started counting. As soon as I hit 3, we booked it across our driveway and into our front yard to go around the house. As soon as we left our spot, I heard it, the sound of accelerating. He saw us. He waited for us to leave. He chased us up to our driveway as we ran around the side. I grabbed Alex's hand and practically dragged him around the house and made him run ahead of the garage door to see if it was locked while I searched for my house key. The guy, at this point, was about 20 feet away from me. The garage door was open, and I swear to God this man ran around the opposite corner of the house that we did as we entered the house. I entered and slammed the door shut, locking it and deadbolting it. I didn't stop running until I opened the house door and ran downstairs with Alex screaming our safe word. Our grandma made a safe word for us that was a normal word that we could use if we were in danger. We just had to scream it. It woke my aunt up, who worked the night shift and was asleep. We told her everything, and she stayed up with us until my grandma got home. We called the police, and that was my first time ever interacting with an officer. The man was never caught. To this day, I don't know what he wanted, but I know it wasn't good. I'm just glad my grandma drilled stranger danger into my head. I don't know where my brother and I would be right now if she hadn't. So to the messy man in the blue and silver truck, let's not meet again. When I was around 8 or so, we moved to a new neighborhood. Same state and general area, but completely new people. At the age of 8, I was nearly completely defenseless, and this will matter later in the story, because I had lost my leg to a car accident 3 years prior, and I was still learning to use a prosthetic leg. My house was the furthest one from the street, with only one way to the house, down the street. There were many houses that were very close to the street, and people could basically talk to you through their walls, they were so close. I'd never minded this, until I caught someone looking at me as I walked down the road. I thought nothing of it. Must have just been someone watching the road and animals, but I was wrong. I walked alone down the road every time. My parents could trust me to go by myself, and I just decided not to ask them to pick me up because of my leg. It was one single day that scared the ever-loving crap out of me. The dude was on the left side of the street, and I was on the right next to him. He just looked at me, and I guess he found me cute because of the look on his face and how he said, and I wish he never had, "Hi, sweetie." I don't know him, he doesn't know me, but this weirded me out. I had a weird hairstyle and color, a lot of hair not going down too much and mainly in front of my face, ending at my eye with a whitish color. It was rare, and people had called me cute when I was younger, but hearing sweetie wasn't a rare occurrence. But the way he said it freaked me out, because behind his voice I could hear a very sinister intention. I almost began running when he said that, but I kept on walking as if it were nothing. He didn't move, just watched me as I went back home. His house was close to the intersection where my bus parked off, which makes this a lot worse. Every day for around a month, I would walk down the street and see him watching me. Every day for longer and more obviously. It was one day that he was in the middle of the road looking at me. I wasn't very tall nor muscular at all, so I was defenseless against a 40-ish-year-old man. He just looked at me, and as I walked by him he turned around and started to follow me. I ran, but he caught up, and the next thing I know he tugged on my backpack and I fell over. He kept me down on the ground and looked at me to make sure there was no one nearby, and then dragged me near his house. And then luck had just hit like a train. As he was trying to drag me, a man was leaving his house parallel to his. He saw and immediately began to sprint towards me, and the guy just ran back to his house fast and left me. He started screaming to the man, picked me up, set me down on my feet, and said to go home before he tried something else. I ran back to my house and told my father, who, as you can imagine, was absolutely livid. I don't know what happened after that, but all I know is that I never saw the man again. This happened a few months ago in the summer, when I had just moved to a new house. There's a community pool just down the road, and the day after we moved in, I went there with some friends. But after an hour or so, I decided to go home because it was too hot. As I walked out of the pool's parking lot, a car also pulled out of it and stopped right next to me. The driver shouted something out to me, but I couldn't hear what he said, so, being stupid, I went closer to see what it was he wanted. "Are you the new girl who just moved in at house number 5? I was confused, but again, being stupid, I said, "Yeah." He told me that he just dropped his girlfriend's kids off at the pool and was just on his way home when he saw me, and offered to give me a lift home. He might have been my neighbor, but he was a stranger in a car. I've never met him before, and there's no way I was getting in, even if there was aircon. "Thanks, but I'm okay," I said, and kept on walking. He then said something that I still think is bizarre, and I don't know why, if it was a tactic of some sort, but he asked me if I at least wanted some candy. I was tired and hot, and it was the most stranger danger cliche I'd ever heard in my life. "I'm 17. I don't want your candy." As soon as I said this, he apologized and told me, "Oh, I thought you were the younger one," and finally drove away. Now immediately this put me on edge, because I took that comment to mean that he was probably talking to me, because he thought I was younger, which made my skin crawl. I also don't even know who he was talking about, because I have a twin and a younger sister, and he thought I, 17, looked way younger. I told my stepdad about what happened, and he just played it off as me being paranoid, but I made sure that I told both my sisters, as they also thought it was creepy as hell. In 2012, I was 11, and my family had gone to Brighton in England to see the rest of the pack. I live in Ireland, so it's a short and easy journey over that we did quite regularly, at least 2 to 3 times a year. Therefore, my sister and I were familiar with Brighton and its streets. One day my sister and I met with our cousins, both girls, and my sister was the eldest of 14 at the time. Then my older cousin, who was 13, and I was 11, and my youngest cousin was 10. So we were all fairly young. We decided to go for a quick walk from my aunt's house to go over to the corner shop. It must have been about 5 minutes from the house, so not far at all. It was the middle of the day, and my parents had no issue with us doing something as innocent as going to the corner shop. We make our way down and buy our goods. Can't beat a dib-dab on a hot day. We left the shop and were hanging about outside, eager to eat our sweets before we got home, so we didn't get shouted at. That's when we were approached by a man. My memory of what he looked like is hazy, but I recall him being around 60 years old, white hair, slightly stooped over. I remember him hanging back away from us, watching from a nearby alley. My cousin and I were young. We just thought this was funny. Something embarrassing and laughable. We start walking away when we notice him out of the corner of our eyes. Again, we found this funny. I don't ever recall being educated on the risks of stranger danger in school. This was just something I would have laughed at. Slowly, he started catching up with us. We just thought this was a big game. I could smack 11-year-old me for being this immature. The corner shop we were originally at was near a roundabout in a little, so we began crossing the road at the roundabout. We did this several times just to see if he would still follow, and he did. We got into the car park at Lidl and he approached us. Now he was within talking distance, like the distance between you and a friend. He was muttering incessantly under his breath, and I couldn't exactly make out what he was saying. I do recall hearing small words, such as swine and other things, and that's when our giggles got a bit quieter. Now, Brighton is slightly rife with issues due to mental illness and addiction. It has a high homeless rate, and even at 11 I understood this. The auntie I had been staying with at the time is a psychiatric nurse, and she was inundated with clients and patients from Brighton. When he approached us and broke that intimate, invisible bubble that sets social expectations and normality, I got a chill. This small interaction in body language seems tiny and superficial, but anyone that's been in a bad situation knows what I mean by that weight that suddenly falls on your chest, full of foreboding and dread. It's hard to exactly define it, but it terrified me. I think my sister and my cousin got this feeling as soon as I did. It wasn't playtime anymore or mockery. This was bad. I don't know what it was, but I knew we had to leave and leave fast. We started to walk away from this man without uttering a word to each other. We all knew. We walked quite fast and began to follow the road to the house. Of course, he followed us. This time, however, he was faster. We were genuinely scared. This man was following us, 4 blatantly young girls, and if he continued, he'd know where we were staying. This was when a guardian angel in disguise swooped in to help us. It was very sudden. A woman and her 3 children came out of a cafe on the other side of the road and ran across the road to our side. We then formed a strange circle as we walked. Her children, who were the same age as us it seemed, at the front, me, my sister and my cousins in the middle, and this woman in the back. She ushered us along quickly and quietly and kept saying, "Keep walking until I say to stop. Don't look back." The man started losing sight of us when the woman walked us home. I think he lost interest once he saw the woman and her band of tiny soldiers. We got in the house, terrified and shaken up, and the woman told my mum and my auntie what happened. They were naturally petrified. It turns out the woman had been watching the interaction from the cafe the entire time. From the corner shop to the car park, she said that this man was notorious for being a predator, and that she recognized him as a well-known one in Brighton. I don't remember much after that apart from my family being scared. I don't know what would have happened if this woman had not helped us. Our immaturity and naivety could have seriously harmed us. If I could meet this unnamed heroine, I'd thank her profusely. Now at 19, I recognize this man as someone who probably had issues with mental illness or addiction, and I hope he's not causing himself or others harm. In any case, let's not meet again. I was a 19-year-old female when this took place. It wasn't overly late, about 8 p.m, but it was winter, so it was already dark. I was walking home from visiting a friend, about 20 minutes from home. It was quiet, and I had headphones in, just listening to music, so I didn't hear this guy approach from behind me. All of a sudden, this cyclist has slammed on his brakes directly beside me and is staring at me. I take my headphones out to glance at him, but he doesn't speak, just stares. I keep walking and I'm pretty close to home now, so I wasn't too worried. This guy starts cycling again, slowly now, matching my walking speed. I keep my eyes forward and ignore him, fully aware he's still looking at me. I get to my flat. I walk down this really quiet, dark country lane, and although it wasn't very long, it wasn't an ideal place to be with this guy. So I stopped and glanced down at my phone, hoping he'd keep going. He did, for a short while, but then he turned around to watch me. There was no way I was walking down that lane with this guy there, so I crossed the street and went down another road, a well-lit one with lots of houses, hoping it would be safer. That's when he said something that chilled me to my core. "Where you going? You don't live that way. I know where you live." I wanted to be sick. He could have been bluffing, but the way he said it, I believed him. I was terrified. I dialed my parents' number and kept walking, aware of this guy following me even now. When my partner answered, I quietly asked him to come get me when I heard the guy go, "Oh, shh," and he cycled off ahead of me. I don't know what startled him so much. I guess it was because he thought I was calling the police, but he took off and I'm forever grateful he did. I overslept this morning and didn't end up leaving my house until 11 a.m. Side note, my family's car has been broken down for a few months, so I was walking to school. It usually takes me half an hour to walk to my school, and I had my headphones in listening to music at full volume, so I couldn't hear anything around me. So I was jamming out to my songs and I see this black ute drive past me. I didn't think anything of it since people drive down the street all the time, but it did a U-turn at the end of the street and passed me again. I thought I was being paranoid when it kept driving past me, so I tried to look through the window to see who it was, but the windows were tinted. It must have driven past me at least 7 times at this point, and I was freaking out, man. Since I live in Australia, we all have uniforms, and at my school there's a junior and senior uniform. As a senior, it's very obvious I have a stripe down the length of my shirt. I had no idea what was going on with this dude, but I was nearing the end of the street, and I was relieved when he turned off at the end of it. I turned the corner and was almost at the front gates when I saw him, parked between me and my school, as I walked as quickly as I could. And that's when I heard the door open. At this point, I sprinted into the school grounds and hid behind a bush. I hear the door slam and he peeled away from the school. I didn't tell anyone until about 5 minutes ago, when me and my mum were walking home from the shops. Apparently there's been a guy in a black ute in the area doing dodgy things. This happened when I was 15, and my younger sister was 13, over 3 years ago. I always loved going trick-or-treating, because free candy, but I always hated being scared because I'm a total chicken. I don't mind someone jumping out from behind a car as I pass yelling boo. I can laugh about that afterwards, but I cannot handle anything further than that. Many parents will often tell their children that they can't go trick-or-treating after a certain age. But my parents weren't like that. They didn't care if we went and got ourselves some free candy as teens. They just stopped going with us. On this particular night, my sister and I were going down a street in our neighborhood that we'd never actually been down before, and all seemed well. Time was running out. Our feet ached from all the walking and our plastic grocery bags were getting heavy. A number of houses were turning their lights out at that point, but there were still several left, and still a fair amount of people walking the street. As we neared the house, a dude wearing a pretty creepy costume jumped out from behind a car and scared us, then ran off to scare others in the same way. I didn't appreciate the scare, but knew he was just having his fun, so we went on, and didn't think much of him. A few houses down the line, the guy who answered the door tells us that they've got no more candy, and the car guy is on us. I wasn't even aware the dude was anywhere near us. The car guy chases us away from the house, but then continues to follow us and starts asking us questions. This dude is clearly over 20, and we're barely 15 and 13. He's asking for our names and we don't respond. He then asks if we can join him, to which we tell him no, and to go away. I don't remember exactly how it all went down, but he just wouldn't leave us alone, and his questions were starting to creep me out more and more. I kept telling myself that the guy was just trying to creep us out because it's Halloween and a lot of people find that fun, but I wasn't having fun at all, and I started feeling kind of unsafe, so I grabbed my sister's hand and we booked it to the next house that still had its lights on. Fortunately, the guy stopped following us after that. At that point, I was feeling pretty dumb with the whole experience. My feet ached, we had a good haul, and the lights were going out. There were starting to be less and less people on the street, and I was a bit shaken up, so I messaged my dad to go collect us at the stop sign where he dropped us off earlier, and we started making our way. About halfway to the stop sign, a small group of guys who might have been around 16 to 18 approached, complimented our costumes, and asked if we wanted a ride home. I quickly turned them down, already on edge from the car guy, and our dad was picking us up, which I told them. They asked if we were sure, and I'd barely began to respond when I saw our dad's car and quickly said, "Yeah, no thanks, there's our ride." Perhaps I was just really paranoid and the car guy was still messing with us, and those guys just generally wanted to help. But I don't think a little paranoia is a bad thing, and I'm not ashamed to say that I'm suspicious of strangers. One thing is for sure though, I realized the downside of being a teen on Halloween night. People don't mind scaring the hell out of you and your parents won't be there to keep you safe if you do encounter someone with ill intent. That was the day I decided I was done with trick-or-treating. This is something that happened several years ago. I was 5 or 6. I used to go for lots of walks around my area. My neighborhood is literally against the back of a small shopping plaza. It has a grocery store, a PetSmart, an outlet, and a couple of food options all in that lot. I was trying to get into better shape, so I would walk about every other day and reward myself with a small meal and walk back home. I remember having a couple of creepy and weird things, like a dude pulled up in his truck once and was like, "Hey, I think I know you. You look familiar. Do you want to ride?" No thanks, buddy. Anyway, one day I had walked down the street a couple of blocks because a friend was supposed to meet me at Subway and we were going to hang out for a bit. But he got caught up in family drama and never showed. So I grabbed a coffee from a nearby place and started walking home. As I got to the shopping plaza right next to my neighborhood and was walking by the parking lot for the grocery store, I heard a guy calling out. I glanced over and there was a dude who looked like he was just putting groceries into his car, waving frantically and calling to me. I ignored him at first because I didn't recognize him and just assumed it wasn't me whose attention he was trying to get. However, as I continued walking, he seemed to keep trying to get my attention, so I kind of gingerly waved back and continued on my way. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him get into his car and I thought that was the end of it, until he started driving along the parking lot at my pace. His window rolled down as he attempted to wave me over. I tried to ignore him and just walked faster towards home. When I got to where the sidewalk opened up, so people could exit the lot out onto the street, he pulled his car up in front of me, blocking my way. There were a million things racing through my mind at that moment, as he rolled the passenger window down and grabbed onto my arm and smiled at me and said, "Oh, I just wanted to tell you you are so beautiful, and you have lovely hair. I just wanted to tell you how beautiful you were when I saw you walking." I thanked him nervously, and he let me go, rolled up his window and drove off. I know this one's pretty harmless, but I was so terrified. I think I was 22 to 23 then, and to add on, I am by no means the standard of attractiveness. I've always been decently overweight and kind of had acne and skin issues, so it really caught me off guard. He very much made me feel unsafe, and I hope to not meet him again. To many people, they might not appreciate just how creepy this encounter might be, but if it were to happen to you unprovoked, who knows, you'd probably feel like how I felt. I'm a 19-year-old female, and I went to a Greek island last May with my 22-year-old cousin, also female, as part of a trip. We liked to go on aimless walks out of the town that we stayed in to see what was around. On our way back from one of these walks, we were on a long, narrow road that dropped off on each side to beaches. Beautiful. A small green car passed by us in the same direction that we were walking and stopped 50 to 100 yards in front of us, just sitting on the road. We say maybe they're just taking in the view. We continue to walk, and when we finally get to the car, the passenger window is down, which happens to be our side, and the man is staring at us through the mirror. As soon as we pass, the car pulls forward past us again. Immediately after the green car drives past us once more, a large truck drives past, again in the same direction, and pulls alongside the green car. They both stop for a moment and are clearly talking to each other. The green car speeds off and the black truck drives forward a bit more and stops on the same side of the road again. Keep in mind we're on a narrow road. We can't turn around because town is the other way. Behind us is just beaches and a few houses. The black truck is stopped on our side of the road, and as we get closer, the driver opens the front and back door of the cab, but does nothing else. Just stands there outside the truck mostly, looking back towards us. We decide this is way too sketchy, Both cars were clearly keeping an eye on us and watching and communicating. When we get closer to the truck, we nope off the road and drop to the beach. We get as far away from the road as the beach will allow us and start speed walking. The man from the truck crosses the road and watches us with binoculars from the side of the beach. We ran until we caught up with another couple and followed them back to town. I then saw the same green car driving back past us multiple times as we ran parallel to the road down the beach. We made it to our hotel safely, locked up, and tied up our doors to the balcony and hallway. In a nutshell, I suppose I nearly experienced an aspect of the Taken movie for myself. But keep in mind, I would absolutely still recommend going to Greece, and this is an extremely unlikely and isolated incident. It's a beautiful place with so many wonderful islands to explore and some very sweet and lovely locals, by far the nicest people I've ever met. I've solo traveled a bit, and the world is actually not as scary as some make it out to be. The person who just broke the world record for youngest person to visit every country is a 21-year-old woman, and she'll tell you the same thing. Anything can happen anywhere. Do your research, learn a bit of self-defense, and always be aware of your surroundings. But always be open to new places too. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. Certainly an unsettling bunch of tales. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram because you should. Because I'm launching something big soon that's nearly done, and I'd like for you to know about it there. And honestly, it would help me make some noise when it's released. And I'd really be super grateful of that. So, think about it. I'd like to give a huge thank you to my lovely patrons for their continued help and support. It really does mean a lot. And if you would like to join Patreon, get some fancy rewards for doing that, you can check the link out in the description. Thanks, guys. Alright then. For now, though, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.